Hello everybody. Welcome to our first, almost absolutely first of all time, Finsemble webinar. Actually, there was one quite some time ago when the product was pretty young, but we'll consider this the first one in the modern era. And we're excited to kick this off with all of you today, and thanks everyone for taking the time to participate. My name again is Christian Hall, and I'm the Chief Product Officer here at the company. And I'm hosting this event from Charlottesville, Virginia, here in the US. And it's wonderful to have so many of you join us from all over the place. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, etc. And I'll share a little bit about myself to start. So I was super fortunate to begin my career in New York City in the very early days of the internet. I was attending graduate school at the time at NYU in the Interactive Telecommunications program. And this was a program with all sorts of people from backgrounds like screenwriting and industrial designers, lawyers, futurists, all kinds of interesting people. And the curriculum spanned everything from studying copyright law and broadband regulatory policy to building interactive rooms using microcontrollers and sensor-triggered music. It's a great story. You should talk to me if we ever run into each other at an event. I start here because our work today is an echo of that time for me. That multifaceted, multi-domain experience that I had, I believe informs the future of how work is done by the modern worker today. And while in New York, I taught myself how to build interactive websites. And that was back when having something on the web do something was a pretty groundbreaking innovation. I built a shoe picker for New Balance shoes. You could pick your feet and it would create you a shoe or whatever. And that proved to be a pretty good gig at the time. So that's somewhat how my career was born. After New York, I worked at several smaller companies building a variety of internet aware software. And I loved being with the little companies, but unfortunately that run with the startups, it ended with the dot-com crash in the early 2000s. And so I transitioned to corporate, and I spent many years at Equifax in Atlanta, where I had several different roles. I was the principal architect of a large platform for what's called real-time credit and risk decisioning, for those of you who know about that. And then I moved really back and forth in a couple places, from product engineering to professional services, and later back again into engineering, where I built out this technology innovation team, kind of office of the CTO, working on new ways of leveraging data and analytics. Finally, I left the technology organization altogether to take the ideas of concept development and experimentation that we used in tech and apply those to new business ventures with the company. And near my end of my time there, I decided to move out of the big city of Atlanta and away from the big company and move to Charlottesville here in Virginia. It's a super cool little town in the mountains here, and I found ChartIQ. And I started here almost 3 years ago. It's hard to believe, as the chief operating officer at the time. And now, as I mentioned before, I focus primarily on our products. So I've spent many years either building, designing, or running teams building and designing enterprise class software. And when I describe myself professionally, I say I'm a software guy, but I struggle against box titles and job descriptions and constraints like that, not just for myself, but for all of us, for most of the modern workforce. I'm an ardent proponent of this concept of the knowledge worker, cross-functional, domain-hopping type of work that's uniquely human. It's the people can do this, and it's really what's left to do when all the easy stuff has been pawned off to the computers. And that's what it looks like to do work now. And we want to simplify this for people. That's the type of software that ChartIQ is dedicated to building. And that's why I'm here with you today. First, fundamentally, because I believe that being part of an organization that's all about enabling people is a blast. And second, from a product perspective, because this idea of a smart desktop is one aligned to the whole notion of effectively serving the knowledge worker. And I would compel each of you to consider how this may change the way you help your teams be successful. So what is this smart desktop concept? Well, the core idea is really very simple. It's software that manages disparate applications, be they from different organizations or using a variety of technologies, and it enables them to operate together in support of how your business works. Today's knowledge worker makes use of a long, long list of applications to do their job. You're the same. Just like many of you, those of you who are in the building of software business, either at your companies or as a vendor, I've spent the last 25 years building applications for these folks. And the problem, we have like 25 years or so worth of applications to wrangle to get their jobs done. So we've solved some of the problems by building for folks, but now we have created a little bit of application overload. And the smart desktop is about solving this overload problem. Applications have also been largely developed as self-contained affairs, so they're isolated from one another. But of course, your work and your workflows at your business run across or between all those applications, resulting in switching and copying and pasting. And data shows that this switching, and even more so the clunky use of information across those applications, is really ineffective at best. Studies validate what we already know intuitively, which is that moving between applications ineffectively is expensive, and the risks of errors is high. So if you miskey a figure or an important record ID, that can be a disaster. Now we believe the smart desktop is the answer here. And so we created Finsemble to serve as the foundation of your smart desktop that I believe can change your business. So for those new to this whole thing, it's a little hard to get your head wrapped around it. It's a lot of talk. It could be much easier if I just show it to you. So let me demonstrate the most basic idea of unifying applications into what we refer to as a workspace. So here you can see two different applications, each in its own window, and they inherit this little strip at the top of each, we call it the title bar, that allows each of them to be manipulated as they're part of this larger workspace. Provide a toolbar up top to gain access to things that are desktop wide, such as finding and launching additional applications. Now, these two applications were built in isolation from one another by different teams focused on different things, and yet through the power of this smart desktop, immediately gain the nature of two parts of this single unified application, simply by being placed into the workspace. They can be docked together to visually operate as a whole. And further, as you can see, they gauge logical connection to one another by sharing information, like you can drag and drop, or manually you can do it that way, or you can automatically synchronize them so that when things change in one application, it's reflected in the other. And they do this intercommunication like that using standard protocols and with very little effort. And so this simple idea is the basis of a whole new way of making work. That's it. That's the basic idea. So let's see how that might be useful to what I guess is the poster child for application overload, the front office trader. So the trader who's often in front of, let's say, 5 or 6 monitors full of applications is dealing with an OMS, a market data terminal, charts, research, a chat client, the list goes on and on. And most of those applications were built not to work together at all. They're sort of built by themselves. And a smart desktop can help here, giving faster access to actionable information in between applications. So here's how that might look for the trader. This shows components, in this case from a Bloomberg terminal, mostly on the right. It's combined with applications outside the terminal, such as this watch list and some charts. And you can push securities, for example, from the watch list outside the terminal into the list within it. And this completely changes the dynamic of how you would use the terminal. Now you can go the other way as well. You can pull information back out from inside the terminal to out. And you can also issue specific terminal commands from an application running in the smart desktop. And finally, as you saw earlier, windows can be made to synchronize, such as when a security outside the terminal is clicked, and applications across the whole desktop respond accordingly. Now, we all know the challenges for the trader, monitors everywhere, people screaming at them. But the smart desktop is equally useful in a completely different part of your business, such as for a call center representative. Now, here on the right is LinkedIn, and on the left, we'll open Salesforce. Oops. All right, we go. So even software as a service applications can be brought into the desktop. You can, in this case, drag a contact from the Salesforce window into LinkedIn, and that locates the person's profile in LinkedIn. You can also use workspaces for different sorts of activities, like if you're going to be doing some prospecting, you might shift your set of apps you're working with for that activity. And here we use synchronization to update Outlook, a couple of CRM windows, LinkedIn, and even Crunchbase. And a single click can drive context into all the linked applications. Finally, even inbound calls can be connected to context automatically in the applications used to handle the calls. And a call center rep likely has a dozen apps they need to use to do their work. Efficiency, of course, is paramount in call centers. And again, this is a great spot for where we'd use a smart desktop. Software as a service that we all use today. It's a great example of how things like the API economy, the assembly economy, whatever you want to call it, has driven companies to specialize. And so they're building these great point solutions. To some extent, though, that's made the workflow problem harder because all these applications have evolved apart from one another. And without the smart desktop, they stay trapped in browser tabs, for example, or in front of or behind one another. Now, too often we're just talking about the front office, which of course that may be where the budget is and where all the highest paid employees are. But most of our customers have thousands of employees, if not hundreds of thousands in some cases. And a lot of those people could use this same thing because they suffer from the same sorts of problems. Smart Desktop is a tool for any knowledge worker, really in whatever business workflow is served by multiple applications. And don't forget about these other areas of your company when you're looking to fund your Smart Desktop project. They can all be stakeholders and even contribute budget to the endeavor. And so I want to say just a little bit about this very interesting backstory as to why this is even a conversation we're having. So prior to modern web technology, software was delivered as applications running natively on the desktop. This is a software we've all been using for years and years. Things like Office applications or the web browser itself, or custom applications built using technologies such as Java or .NET. These slides were actually pretty hard to make because we had to pick dates, and it was funny to think about how long it takes technology trends such as Java to get widespread usage. So 95 seemed like a pretty good date for Java, though I suspect that wasn't when the first Java app hit a financial desktop. But these types of native applications, they're a chore to manage for an enterprise and how they're installed, desktop to desktop, how they're secured and how they get updated. And while previously web applications were fairly limited in capability, back in New York, I built the shoe picker. That was a long time ago. That was pretty limited in what the browser could offer. But then came along HTML5 and style sheets and JavaScript, things like Ajax, and that made it possible to build fully capable applications. So this technology made it easier and cheaper to develop cross-platform and cross-device software. So everybody piled on and teams flocked to using web technology for delivering their applications. Those applications are all, as we mentioned, locked up in browser tabs and disconnected from one another. And they don't act like they do on the desktop. So they're disconnected from applications remaining on your desktop. And you're doing all the switching, copying, pasting, and moving around tabs. I'm actually the poster child for tabs. I have like 150 tabs open in my browser. Also, desktop users are generally frustrated with their experience when web applications fall short of what they're used to on their desktop. So with that set of frustrations and expectations, it's time to come full circle and bring applications back to the desktop, leveraging the advantages of web-oriented technology. So why do I have 2012 on the desktop? Well, of course, this notion of getting web apps on the desktop and working together, it really is a conversation that's been going on now for a decade. And great strides, innovations were made there. It's really been kind of an amazing journey. But the solutions to date, they've left a lot of work up to the already stressed engineering teams that we're hearing about from our clients. They're struggling. We hear this all the time. We refer to that original notion as the first generation smart desktop. But we're focused on the second generation smart desktop. And this is the investment you are all making or about to make at this point. So let's talk about requirements that you need to consider and what it takes to be a second generation smart desktop. The first thing you're going to need is a secured container. And this is the thing that allows the web technology to run outside the web browser and on the desktop. Electron, there's a framework called Electron, and it's the industry standard for this sort of thing. Hundreds of companies are using it. Slack, Intuit, WordPress, Microsoft, WhatsApp, they all use this Electron to bring web technology to the desk, but they don't need the kind of security that banks use. And so for that, it needs to be secured. So we built this secure Electron adapter. And the adapter handles the details of making sure your desktops are secure and the apps that are running in them are secure. And so our solution is unique, though, in that it has been verified by a leading third-party security firm called Bishop Fox. The next requirement is, of course, that things talk to each other. So you need a way for applications to communicate. Now, the first generation solutions also provided this sort of basic concept. But as the desktop grows, it's just no longer enough to have simple communications buses and APIs. You need a full-blown communications infrastructure that's easy to use for your people. So Finsemble has a sophisticated message router, giving developers multiple transports and protocols, and tools to allow the auditing and troubleshooting this web of messages for apps talking to one another. And the raw tech is just not enough. You need the UI that goes along with it. So we offer synchronized launching UIs that you can use immediately. Now, once you get a start on handling this enablement of workflows, you're likely to do that more than once. And as you saw sort of in the prospecting example, teams may have tools they use in the morning and switch to different tools after the market closes, for example, or it might look different to work long running tasks than to react to inbound phone calls. So you create different workspaces to make that happen. We, of course, provide a facility to manage that. So you can see here that it's super simple to switch from one workspace to another. And when you restore a workspace, Finsemble returns each window to where you left it, even when you have 6 monitors with different sizes and orientations. And as you gather the applications that you need to do your work and set them up just the way you want, you can save those configurations as workspaces. And they can even be marked as favorites, you'll see, making them super easy to access. You need them quick. Puts a little thing up in the toolbar there. Workspaces, by the way, can be pushed into desktops centrally if you're sort of pushing them out to everybody in a department, or they can be developed by the users themselves, and then they can share them with their teammates. Now, as you bring more into the desktop or into your catalog of applications, search becomes super critical. So Finsemble offers a federated search framework to allow multiple search providers to be combined. And those results are brought together and made actionable by the appropriate applications. So here, a single search identifies several search providers are provided here. One that looks at apps on the desktop, one that has tickers off of a symbology service, and we've even put in Seinfeld episodes, which we harvested from the internet. Now we'll pick a symbol, which in turn opens up a corresponding chart. And just because it's fun to show, we'll also pick a Seinfeld episode, which really goes to show that all sorts of providers can be hooked into the search framework. I don't suspect you'll be doing Seinfeld episodes, but you can see it opens a web browser now instead of a chart. Now, of course, this software all faces your people, and they have high expectations. UI is a tough business. You need one that is already ready to go and that you're not monkeying with and having to maintain over the course of time. So Finsemble takes care of all those details. We start by managing the general aesthetic of the desktop, and then you can apply your own theme to match your company's brand or internal standards and what have you. And then we also handle things like multiple monitors and all sorts of configurations. And we make sure things like menus behave as they should on the desktop, even though they're using web tech. And they're not trapped in like the corner of a browser where they can't find their way out of the window. The windows themselves also have awareness not only of one another, but of the desktop itself, so they can see the edge of the screen, and they can be tiled together to simplify layout. They also can be combined using the tabbing metaphor. And finally, Finsemble offers what I'll call real-world window handling. So you can arrange the desktop exactly how it makes sense for the user and the behaviors that are sometimes super idiosyncratic of the applications that are being used on the desktop. So even things like flyouts or expanding windows, they'll all work fine. Now your user base is diverse, so they need different applications or workspace behavior depending on their job function. And we provide facilities to tailor that desktop experience dynamically based on who authenticates into the desktop. And Finsemble can integrate using your Active Directory or entitlement systems to make that work. So here's a pretty straightforward example of how Finsemble could offer Audrey a different desktop experience entirely from Colin based on their credentials. So you'll see different workspaces, different favorites, different applications. And this is an example of how Finsemble uses internally a declarative configuration-based architecture instead of everything simply being coded. This makes dynamic behavior possible, not just in this case, but throughout the entire platform. Once again, these are the types of things that no one even considered in the first generation smart desktop. Now, your desktop does not want to be an island, and so you need to hook it to the rest of your enterprise. So Finsemble offers storage connectors, adapters to remote databases, the federated search provider framework I just discussed before, and also an authentication framework for hooking into your Active Directory or entitlement systems for single sign-on and that dynamic configuration that I described before. Supporting desktop users, particularly by the thousands in many cases, is tough. It's a tough business, and so you'll need help to make that easier. So we offer tools to check things like running processes on the desktop, their performance, to see what's going on. Because remember, you're often assembling things that were not written by your teams. And then to dig into aggregated logs, we provide instrumentation for all the different applications and components of the platform to issue their own logs. And of course, they're all distributed from one another on the desktop. So that'll also be aggregated and made sense of. So we have tools for your folks to do that. And these tools are critical, so much so that we get comments all the time about how people love them. Now, finally, though most organizations are adopting the use of web tech, many have large portfolios of legacy applications native that they've built up over the years. And so Finsemble allows native apps to work right alongside their web-based peers, so you can transition to web technology over the course of time. Now, here's a pretty simple example. Alongside this web-based chart, we'll open a Windows Notepad, and it becomes a part of the smart desktop, participating in snapping and docking, etc., like all the other windows. Now, they also will save and restore with your workspaces. So just like all the rest of the windows. So Finsemble allows this to happen, by the way, with no code. It's entirely configuration driven, and we're the only platform that offers this capability. Now, don't be fooled. If you just need to take a simple web app and deliver it to a desktop, you have all kinds of options for that. But if you're looking for a fully capable smart desktop and the support your organization needs over the long haul, maintenance, etc., you're going to need more than that. Now, Finsemble is a powerful, ready-to-use second-generation smart desktop. So I have to take a minute to celebrate here, the Party Parrot. Releases, of course, are a big deal for software people, or even releases of non-software type things. And it's a great to take this few moment opportunity to thank all the people here at ChartIQ that worked hard to make the 4.0 release happen. Now, the good news, the best news for you, is that we take on all that hard work so you don't have to. Now, I'd like to highlight just a few of the features that are available in this latest 4.0 release. Each release, we work to service both the technical teams responsible for supporting your workflows, as well as the users out on the floor doing the work. And especially noteworthy in this release are the new application management tools that we've added that are compatible with the FDC3 application directory specification. I'll show you those in a second. We've put a new coat of paint on the user interface, which both improves clarity and further refines how it feels to use the software. And that compelling nature of software we think is super important. It's a focus for us as a business. So let me show you a little bit about the Advanced App Launcher and App Catalog. Some of our clients who have hundreds or even thousands of applications, they need a way not just to manage them on the desktop, but also assist in their folks discovering and their ability to distribute new applications to get people to use them. So we developed two new features. The first is the Advanced Application Launcher. So it allows more than just the simple list of apps you saw before. You can now use folders to stay organized and put commonly used apps together. And I'll create one here for you to see how that works. And you can search or filter by tags to find the apps that you need, even with hundreds available in the desktop. And favorites work just like they do in the basic app launcher. So we'll use this filtering to find an app to stick into that new folder that was created. And folders can also be moved around to your liking to organize apps. In addition to the app launcher, we have a new application catalog, and this is fed by an FTC3 app directory. It supports the discovery of apps through these carousels of highlighted applications. And just like in the launcher, you can also search and filter to find what you need. And then you manage the addition and removal of smart desktops right here from the catalog. So you can see now they'll show up in the launcher. I can use the tag to filter them down and launch straight from there. So that's our new application management suite. Those are highlights from anyway. And I'll also share a couple items for the technology folks that are listening. So first, in 4.0, we've souped up Finsemble's startup sequence. And this adds staging and checkpoints to allow for more complex component interdependencies. So oftentimes, there are services that need to be up before a component comes up so it can make sense of the world. And so this makes that much easier to do. And we've updated how we handle some of the underlying window performance. well as giving us access to new possibilities for our user interface in the future. Of course, there's always a ton of little things in a release that are tough to show, but those are the high points of this release. So here are just a few things coming up in the nearer term that we have in the works. The first is the 1.1 FTC3 specification is coming out any day now. We are part of FTC3 and FinOS, and very much look forward to providing support once that comes out. Shooting for the end of the quarter, and then we'll obviously need to do a release cycle after that. But we are very excited to be incubating new thinking as well on how notifications can be managed and leveraged. Event-driven activity is a big part of the workflow and how we work today. So that's important to us. And finally, we're making it even easier for developers who choose to customize and extend Finsemble and to work within the framework. And so that's what the upgrade in TypeScript support are for. Our clients really drive our roadmap. So if you are looking for something that you don't see or that we don't have, we'd certainly love to hear from you. Now, we know this is often new territory for our clients, and they tell us their stories. We know we're helping them because we've been told we're saving months to years of work. We've been told we're rescuing projects that have been struggling for a long, long time. And we've been told that Finsemble and our team are a joy to work with, which of course we love to hear because that's all we're focused on doing. We're passionately striving to deliver that level of service. Here are some of our people, our actual people in the Charlottesville office, and they're here to help you. So you should come talk to them. We offer a complete and deeply considered product that we are very proud of, obviously. Finsemble is not just parts and pieces. And building user interface driven software, user facing software, it's tough. And so doing this new technology, a new paradigm, can be even harder. And we have a lot of clients who started this smart desktop journey on their own. They have sharp folks who see a framework like Electron come out, or who can crank out a quick React application. And so they try to build all this themselves. And soon it becomes clear that they need help. And that's why we're here. So there are swarms of little details to get right when you're building enterprise caliber desktop. And we're now years into that journey. And this is all our Finsemble team does all day. So our team is always excited to help make possible the desktops that you might be dreaming up. And I urge you to come learn more by speaking with us. And I really, this is important, actually try Finsemble out. You get white glove treatment from our team, and you can have your teams up to speed and something of your own built in the span of 10 days or less. So we're also making Finsemble easy to try directly from our website very shortly. Now, before I close, I want to invite you to our very first ever client conference. This is being held in the spring in April in New York City. And I'll be there. Several of us are going to be there. And we're super excited to put this together for you. So please speak to someone on your sales team, on our sales team, your account manager, et cetera, to get the details. Now, I know that's a lot to cover. So hopefully it made sense. And thanks for hanging in there. I'm going to switch into question mode for a second and try to answer some questions that come up. So we get this every time. Will we get a recording? Is this going to be distributed later? Absolutely, we will be posting a form of this webinar on our website. We're shipping it out to folks on the invite list. Okay, here's a question. What changes do we have to make to our applications so that they'll work with this technology? Very little, and it depends obviously a little bit on what you're trying to do. But if you just want them to participate, like in that native example, for example, there's no code at all. If you just want them juxtaposed so they're not hidden in tabs, it's all configuration, zero code. If you want them to talk to one another, you go everything from very simple FTC3 compliant messages or using custom protocols to do things very sophisticated. So there's a whole gamut, but it's easy to get started. A question about how you publish new applications. So we should talk a little bit about the infrastructure that's required here. Everything I showed you is running on the desktop. There's no server, except for if you want to provide your app catalog or things that are used across desktops. So deploy an application, it's just a URL on a very simple web host. And so you build your app, you stick it on a file system on a server, and it's easy to make it either part of the app catalog or directly part of the desktop. There's a question about why web technology and not native. I covered a little bit of that on sort of why people are flocking to web. A lot of it's really There's the idea that you can build the web thing to run across platform and across device, but also just simplifies deployment. Question about collaborative desktop, and do we have any plans to support collaborative workflows with Bloomberg or Symphony? Absolutely, we do partner with these companies, and we demonstrate a couple of those things when we come show you the software. So ask our folks about that when we show it to you. Can you explain a little more about the fast, easy upgrade in Finsemble 4.0? So just to be clear, the thing I made a big deal about the upgrade is actually coming out in probably our next release. And for those of you familiar with Finsemble, we're just reworking the way we call the seed or the archetypical project that starts. We're greatly simplifying that so that when we release new code or your folks release new enhancements to it, that's much easier. There's not a lot of code merging and that sort of thing, so it should make a big difference there. Can one Finsemble framework be used for both internal and external workspaces, i.e. one view delivered to my retail traders and one view locked down for internal employees who manage accounts? Absolutely. That's no problem. When can we get the release for our release features? They're already out. So contact your account manager. 4.0 is out. You can use it starting immediately. There's a question about infrastructure that we need to support it. So I mentioned before, an app directory, the catalog, your apps themselves, Finsemble, almost all of the Finsemble platform itself, you can host for within your organization in a simple website. And so there's very little to deploy and keep updated directly on the desktop. Where are our clients having the most difficulties when implementing a smart desktop? Good question. I would say maybe 3 things I would point out there. The first is, as I mentioned, people are trying to build it all themselves. They're used to building things. They've got whole teams that are building apps for the company. And this infrastructural stuff feels like, no problem. It actually is a pain in the neck. We have a bunch of people working very hard to make sure it works. And I can assure you it's non-trivial. So that's the first thing, try to build it yourself. The second one is both clients and partners often struggle with the history of building, I'll call sort of monolithic apps. Think about an application that's more than one function, and so it tends to have multiple panels in it. So single page web app, it's got panels all over the place. It really is more effective to break those into component pieces so that each of the pieces, let's say a contact list or a blotter or something, I think those all can be separate because then they can be connected to other things in the desktop. And then the third thing I would say is people are caught up in the enterprise nature of a decision here, and they want to make a decision for all time and forever. I would say, first of all, you can just get started. I would urge you to try something small and that's business relevant to you and get folks to look at it and think about it, because it does take time to get people's heads around it. And also, there's some flexibility here. FTC3 is coming out. These are not permanent forever decisions. Not boxing in something permanently if you don't want to do that. And I think the last question that we'll have time for is just how do I get started? How do you get going with this? So as I mentioned, shortly we'll allow for you to just download it and try it. So your engineering teams can do that. And that's great. We're happy to do that, and we have wonderful documentation to help you. But if you're really wanting to try to not just technically get your head around it, but think about what you're going to do with it, I would really urge you to speak with our account management team. We'll get you in contact with our client success team. And that's all they do, is to help people kind of go through the process of thinking about what they're trying to do, what is a good way to try that out, and how to get your stakeholders something that they can touch and feel pretty quickly so you can get participation from the rest of your organization. Thanks so much for coming. Feel free to ship us additional questions offline or come talk to us at our event in April. Thanks. Take care.